Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Stonebridge Community Church. My name is Max, and I just want to wish all our moms out there a happy Mother's Day this morning. In just a moment, we're going to sing. Mike's going to bring you the message here in a little bit, but before we do that, will you please pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for those moms out there and just all that they do. Thank you for just your grace and your mercy. And just all that you provide to us on a daily basis. Lord, we're just so grateful. Will you please just fill these homes with your blessing today as we sing out your glory here this morning. And we say this all in Jesus' name. Amen. You work in signs and wonders. Your voice is light and thunder. Your glory burns in every star. You flood the earth with beauty. I see you all around me. Oh God, how wonderful you are. And so I fall down with a million saints, lift up my hands and say, you're holy, holy. Join in with the ancient songs, heaven and earth respond. You're holy, holy. Your heart for every nation reaches through generations. You call each prodigal your child. You bridge the greatest distance to grace us with your presence and draw the sinner to your side. And I can't help but fall down with a million saints, lift up my hands and say, you're holy, holy. Join in with the ancient songs, heaven and earth respond. You're holy, holy. Oh, for a million songs to sing. Oh, for the glory of our King. Oh, for a million voices raised. Oh, in the roar of endless praise. Holy, you are holy. Fall down with a million saints, lift up my hands and say, you're holy, holy. Join in with the ancient song, heaven and earth respond. You're holy, holy. Fall down with a million saints, lift up my hands and say, you're holy, holy. Join in with the ancient song, heaven and earth respond. You're holy, holy. Well, we have a few things that we would love to bring to your attention. So grab those calendars, and maybe a couple of these things will pertain to you or your family, and we would love to be able for you to join us at one of these things. The first thing that we have is our child dedication. We don't baptize babies here, but we definitely do a child dedication, and we're going to have our next one on June 6th on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. service. So if maybe you're in the area and you would like to have be a part of that child dedication, we would love to hear from you. I know we have one family already signed up, and we would love to join in with a couple more. So if that works for you, if that's something that you would like to do, I'm going to give you in a moment just a way to contact us about that. we're also having a Mother's Day outing. It's not really beyond Mother's Day. It's just kind of looking for those moms out there that maybe might want to get away for just a little bit. It's going to be on Wednesday, May 26th. From 11:30 to 1:30, and it's just going to be a lunch and just kind of a time to get out and gather outside. And so we're asking you to bring your own lunch, but what we're doing is we're meeting up at the Darden Prairie courthouse up there, and if you don't know where that's at, we will definitely get you that information if you want to contact the office. But it's just going to be a great time for some moms to get together, just kind of be outside, enjoy a lunch, and some conversation. So once again, if you're in the area and that just seems like a great idea to you, we would love for you to join us there. And then over this weekend, we're kind of changing over processes and kind of some background stuff here at the church about how we trying to get more things into one platform. So it makes it a little easier on the office. Maybe hopefully it makes it a little easier on you guys. So we have our church directory, and we're transferring that over into another system. And so you should be, if you're a part of Stonebridge and you're a part of our planning center signups in any way, shape, or form, if you've been here or not, you should have gotten an email. So make sure you check your junk email, your spam email for an email from us. And it's going to give you the opportunity to go in and kind of tell us what information you want in the directory. If you want to be in the directory, if you don't want to be in the directory, all of that's going to be explained right there. And so if you have not received that email, it probably means that you're not part of our planning center system. And so if you would like to be a part of that directory, all you need to do is fill out the Connect card, and then you will go ahead and you will get that email sent to you. So how do we do all these things? How do we get in touch with the office? How do we fill out the Connect card and other multiple things? Well, you can. The easiest way is to scan that QR code with your camera from your phone. If you're watching this on your phone, you can just go to stonebridgedp.org, and all that information will be there as well. You can contact the office directly. But if you scan that QR code, it's going to take you right to where you can fill out that Connect card, and we would love to hear that you have joined us this morning. If you have a prayer request, we would love for you to fill out a prayer request. And then there's also the opportunity to give and continue to see ministry work here through Stonebridge. And so if you could do one of those things or three of those things, and then you can also take the moment, and in that comment section down there, it says prayer request or comments. If you want more information about the child dedication or the Mother's Day outing or anything like that, you can just put that in right there too, and somebody will get right back to you. So that is all I've got. I'm going to give us just a minute to just connect, and then Mike will be back right after that with the message.
Hey, welcome. I'm glad to be with you whenever you're watching this. I want to talk to us today about what mom wants. Kind of thinking ahead to Mother's Day. Maybe you're watching this on Mother's Day. And you know, it's always a challenge to know, right? What am I going to get mom? Some of us are able to push it off to our kids. Our kids are older now, and she's not my mom, But there's a sense in which the women in our lives, whether they're our moms or our wives, we want to honor. We want to show that we appreciate, that we love them, that we care about them, and usually it's done with a gift. So that's where I'm headed. Like, what does mom want? What are great gifts from mom? And if I could leave you with a thought, all right, on this Mother's Day, what I think that the women in our life want more than anything, if I can make this work here, is a sense of unconditional love, all right? Unconditional love. That's what the women in our world want. And this morning, or whenever you're watching this, I want us to dive into a little bit about what does that look like. Unconditional love is the greatest gift that you can give your mom, your wife, the women that are in your world. It was announced this week that Bill and Melinda Gates, married 27 years, announced that they were splitting. And I've sort of been following that in the news, following the headlines, and that led me into a whole section I didn't really understand much, but is apparently quite common as we're into 2021. I've read the pandemic's messed with a lot of marriages, and that there are more people that have filed for divorce coming out of the pandemic than going in, if I'm not mistaken, and largely that has to do with people who have been forced to sort of to live together. I mean, we could sort of pretend and live in different worlds, but the pandemic has forced people to live together. But one of the other interesting phenomena socially that we're seeing is what's called the gray divorce or the silver splits. That is, couples who have been married 25 years or longer. The divorce rate among those folks, those who are 50 and older, has increased. Well, let's just do another way. I was reading a study that said from 1990 or prior to 1990, less than 10% of couples who had been together 25 years or greater divorced. That number in 2010, when the census was done in 2010, that number jumped to 25%, or 1 in 4 couples aged 50 or older or had been married 25 years or longer were seeking to get out of their marriages. And the reasons why is sort of maybe they're a duh. It is sort of an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? Bill and Melinda Gates, you've been together 27 years. Why now? Al and Tipper Gore were sort of the poster child couple for that. People were like, well, you just seem so happy, and you've got the money, and you've got notoriety, and got a nice home. All the things that we think go into making a couple happy, they had, and yet they called it quits. Stuff that I read, when you get to be that age, the children are gone. How many couples have decided that they were really happy in the marriage, but they were going to stay together for the sake of the kids? By the time you get to be in your 50s and 60s, your kids are probably out of the house. You're not staying together for the kids. For some, it's addictions. They have woken up and one day realized that the person that they married is addicted in some way, because as we've gotten older, our bodies are breaking down, and we turn to either prescription meds or to self-medicate, and we just go, I don't want that anymore. Women are much more independent at this point in time in their life. They're older, they've got successful careers on their own, and maybe they just come to a realization that I don't need to keep putting up with the nonsense, and so they're going to seek a way out, right? I think one of the other things that I read was, just the sense of the people who make poor choices with money. We do that earlier in life, we can overcome them. You make some poor choices later in life, and it's hard to think about how we're gonna make this, right? And so anger, resentment, bitterness enter into the picture, and we say, I want out. Or as Bill and Melinda Gates said, Bill Gates said this week, a great deal of thought and a lot of work on our relationship. We've made the decision to end our marriage. After 27 years, we've raised 3 incredible children, and we built a foundation that works all over the world to enable all people to lead healthy, productive lives. We continue to share a belief in that mission, and we'll continue to work together at the foundation, but we no longer believe we can grow together as a couple in this next phase of our lives. We ask for space and privacy for our family as we begin to navigate this new life. What did couples say? We've just drifted apart. We're no longer interested in the same thing, or some of the stuff that I've read is that they've built a life He's built a life, his career. She's built a life, maybe a career. Maybe they share the kids, but you know what? They haven't built a life together. What is it that we can give our moms and our wives, those women in our world, that would be the greatest gift? I think it's unconditional love. That we're going to be there through the end of this, and we're not going to find a way to get out. You know, marriages have always been a lot of hard work. In Paul's day, if you have a Bible, would you open with me to Colossians, the book Colossians? We've been hanging out there the last couple of weeks, and one more week here of this, talking about 50 Days of Hope. I want to drive us back to this kind of beginning church that Paul wrote this letter to. A couple of common folks had started it and were shepherding it, and Paul just heard about what was happening there, and Paul wanted to write them, commend them for their love, warn them of some bad beliefs that had kind of crept in, drove their focus back to Jesus, and said, let's just get your eyes back on Jesus, and don't let anybody cause you to drift one way or the other, deviate from Christ. But this is Colossians chapter 3, verse 1. Since you've been raised with Christ, he says, set your hearts on things above where Christ is seated. Put off some bad things. Put on some new things. As God's chosen people, verse 12, holy and dearly loved, he says here. And he says, clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. We saw that we need to forgive one another. We need to bear with one another. It means simply to live together in an understanding way. And as sometimes friction happens in our marriages, in our homes, we need to learn to forgive. And we drop down to verse 18 and 19, 20 is where I want to hang out here, where he just says, now, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. And children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. You know, the church, the church was okay, but the marriages in Paul's day were equally a mess. In Paul's day, you got married as a male because you needed someone to bear your children and keep the family name. That's what you're hoping. You were hoping for a male baby. Female babies, they were the ones that were cast out, weren't thought highly of. You really wanted a son, and primarily so that he could carry on your trade, your business, and the lineage, the family name. You had other women in your world to please you. In fact, most men in Paul's day would have had several women, right, he looked to. In Ephesus was the temple to Diana, and she was kind of the fertility goddess, and she was worshipped by just pleasure, sexual pleasure, if I can say that, right? And that would have been, remember, we said Ephesus was sort of the driving place of the day. That's where it's likely that Philemon and Epaphras heard Paul teach about Christ in Ephesus. And so, but, you know, just 80 miles away and being the big, it's sort of like today, you know, when things happen in New York or Chicago or LA or down south of us, maybe in Dallas, and Miami, they just sort of work their way to the center. And that's what would have happened here. That marriages were a mess. And now Christ is coming into this church, and people are coming to find Jesus. And Paul's saying, look, there's going to be a different way that we need to think about our marriages. We need to think about those men and women, the spouses that we've married. Why is it that marriages fail so often? Why is it so hard? I thought of a couple of things, and maybe these might resonate with you. Marriage is hard work. There's no other way to say it, right? And it's very easy to be lazy and selfish in our relationships. To think of ourselves, to put ourselves first. We come home from a hard day. Often men and women working in the home, and everybody wants to chill, but there's still children to attend to, where there's still household tasks that have to be done. It happens in our home. I bet it's happening in your home. And if we put our blinders on and we just think about what I need, and I'm not thinking about what my wife might need, what Patty might need, you can see where things would go off the rails in a hurry. I did some Googling this week and I Googled in the search engine, why is it that wives feel sad? And the top things that I saw were that women typically feel like that there's a disconnection there. That they don't feel connected to their spouse. There's a couple separate worlds going on. I find what happens oftentimes in a lot of new marriages is, if you think about it, what's happened in our day is that couples are marrying older, generally speaking 27 to 30 years. Well, that's a long time to have lived apart, lived alone, and you've developed your own habits. And so what do we find in marriage is you bring two people who are now joined together on paper and physically together, but still living separate lives. And the number one complaint of our women is that they feel disconnected from their men. There's a lack of feeling that there's an intimate connection there. There's little communication. There's little sense of feeling appreciated, feeling valued, feeling like they bring something to the table, and it just eats at them. And then there's a lack of intimacy. And while there is sex happening, there's just not a feeling of a connection there of the soul, of the heart, of really being in love. So you have the act, but the emotional closeness is sort of gone. And it just eats at women. And it goes back to what I said. We're lazy, okay, and we tend to be selfish. And I think Paul was trying to address that in this letter when he just reminds them, look, that's what compassion and being kind to one another is about. That's what being gentle with each other is about. It's not just the strangers. It's the people in our homes. It's our wives. It's our husbands. It's as couples living together, forgiving each other. So he starts out by addressing the wives. And I just thought it was interesting. If this was, it's not a book. He's given a couple of verses. That's all I got here. If I just had these two verses to try and say, hey, how could we improve our marriage relationships? How could we give the gift of love to one another? All right. He just says to women that they would be willing to submit, okay, to their husbands. Just a couple things here. The word submit is, I think, if I use the four-letter word in marriage, Christian marriage, but I need to say this because that's what the text says, that wives are to submit to their husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Here's what submission is not. He doesn't direct women to obey their husbands. That's to children. Submission and obedience are not the same thing. To submit simply means to yield the rank. It's a military term in which a private might yield to the sergeant to a lieutenant, the lieutenant to a general. They're equal as men, but because of the rank they hold, they yield their rights to someone else. A player yields his rights to a coach. A student will yield the classroom to the teacher. The teacher will yield or submit to the principal. Those in a courtroom will yield or submit to the judge. We will yield or submit to one another when we're on the highways. If you see a yield sign, or if you see a sign that says speed limit this, you're voluntarily giving up your rights to do what you might want to do and yielding them to another. It says here, to their husbands, not to any man. I think the word and the idea of submit and submission it's been an abuse in some churches, where the taught from the pulpit and permeate out into the people is that women are somehow subservient to men. Nothing could be further from the truth. Paul says in Galatians that men and women were equal in the eyes of God. But in our marriages, for our homes to work smoothly, there's an admonition for women to voluntarily, because you chose to enter into this relationship, that you're going to yield to your husband. Now, what does that yielding mean? I think it means to work together. I think it means to cooperate together. As I've already said, men, this is not addressed to you. This is not Mike saying to Patty, hey, you need to submit to me, right? I've got my own verse here, and we're going to hit on that. But just, ladies, I want to encourage you that the right term or the right way to think about submitting to your husband is to come under his leadership, is to work together with him, is to encourage and build up him, is to respect him, is to value him, because you believe that God has given him to you and that he will one day answer to God for the direction that he's taking your family. And the Lord would simply say to you, as you would submit to the Lord, as is fitting to Jesus, submit to your own husband. I think, as I said here, was reading something, one of the books that men have used this verse to dominate their wives. And it's become sort of like keep the woman under the thumb. I heard, here it is, a newlywed couple drove up to the hotel on their honeymoon, and the bride said, let's not act like newlyweds. Let's act like we've been married a long time. And hearing that, the new groom said, well, great, then you grab the luggage. You know, that's just the wrong picture that we have of what it means to submit for the woman under the man's leadership. It is just that you're equal, that God has brought you together, and you're willing to yield your rights to the man that God has brought into your life. You're going to pray for him, you're going to encourage him, you're going to respect him, you're going to build into him, and you're going to trust that God is going to use him and that he will answer to God and God will direct him. All right? So then, now, look what he says. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Men, we're called to love our wives. It's interesting to me that wives are never told to love their husbands. But men, we are told 5 times in the New Testament scriptures that we are to love our wives. The word is simply agape. It's a Greek word which means is just an unconditional love. It is a love that wants the best for the one loved. It's a choice that we make. It's not feeling love. In the Greek, there's the word eros, from which we get the term erotic. That is a physical love, a sexual love, all right? Then there's the Greek word of phileo, which is the idea of friendship, brotherly love, if I can get that out there, friendship. But the word used here is this idea of agape. Husbands, agape your wives. Husbands, love your wife and do not, as it says here, be harsh against them. And so I want to, if I can, give us 4 ways, guys, that we can practically love our wife. If it's not a feeling, if it's a choice, if it's words and actions, well, what would it look like for us as men to love our wives? Paul says to the church in Ephesus, remember where Diana was, the temple, and they were coming out of that. He said, men, you are to love your wife as Jesus loves the church and gave himself for her. All right? So, let me just real quickly give us 4 ways that I think that, guys, we can, in all practicality, love our wives, love our moms, give them what they want most, that unconditional love. Here it is. Be kind. The text reads here, just don't be harsh with them. Don't be rude, crude. Don't bring forth feelings of bitterness. Don't try and irritate with our actions and our attitudes. Just to be kind. So we have up there, that's the same word, same idea, back up in verse 12. Clothe yourselves with compassion, with kindness, to be considerate. In 1 Peter 3:7, guys, it tells us to live with our wives in an understanding way, to be considerate of them, to understand that they're wired differently than you and I are. We're not the same. Guys, we tend to be fixers and problem solvers. Women tend to be intuitive. Women are nurturers. Guys, we are more hands-on. We're more maybe prone to want to get things done. We maybe tend to use less words. We're just wired differently. But the instruction that Jesus has for us is the same way that Jesus loves the church. Guys, let's love our wives that way. And one of the ways he loves us is with kindness, with compassion, with consideration, with looking and asking for their view. If you want your wife to submit herself to you, live in such a way that she can respect you. And I think one of the ways that does is just seek her input. Use your words to build her up. Ephesians 4:29 simply says to use language, use words, okay, that build people up rather than tear them down. I heard the story of a couple that was celebrating their golden anniversary, their 50th anniversary, and the pastor went to ask the groom, if you will, how he managed to stay married and solidly committed to his wife Sarah for 50 years. What he said was, let's see here if I can pick this up. After they had said their vows and the ceremony was over, Sarah's husband, the pastor, took him aside and was just talking to him. And he said, how'd you manage to do it? And what the gentleman said, he pulled this pastor in and he said, see this watch? I got this watch a long time ago. And engraved on the watch were the words that said, say something nice to Sarah. Say something nice to Sarah. Every time he looked at his timepiece, he was reminded to encourage, to compliment, to build up his wife. Guys, your marriages would go a long ways if we could become the men who were kind and considerate, and our language encouraged our women and built them up, and we just said something nice to them on a daily basis. All right, what else can we do? I think we can listen. We could be better listeners. If one of the complaints, if you will, that women have is they feel unappreciated, undervalued, they don't feel like we communicate with them, well, what would happen if we just changed and just look forward to listening? Here's the challenge, right? We know that the studies have shown that women they use more words than guys do, and sometimes our parts of our brains want to tune out when we get home. But what if you set aside, I've seen some stuff that says if you could set aside the first 20 to 30 minutes after you get home and really tune into your wife, and she didn't have to fight for your attention. You asked how her day went. You complimented the house. If the house maybe looked like, didn't look all that great because she had a really rough day, maybe you just pitched in. It's not easy. I promise you that it's not easy. Patty and I have gone rounds with that. And yet she has a gentle way of just bringing me back and reminding me that one of my duties as a Christian husband is to be kind and be willing to listen to her. I was just looking down here at a note that I had of a guy who went out on his 18th anniversary with his wife. He played 18 holes of golf, and they went to dinner. They had a great dinner, and as they were finishing and walking to the car, she looked at him and said, "Hey, do you want to go another 18?" And he thinks for a minute, and he says, "Oh no, it's too dark." It's just, we just maybe don't do the best job of tuning into where our wife is at, the words that she uses, the expressions, the feelings that maybe she's conveying. Guys, if we would be willing to listen to our wives, we might find that our relationships would take a turn in a much more dramatic way, in a healthy way that we want. Let's protect our wives. that's unconditional protects. What's that look like in a marriage? I think when God gave the prescription in Genesis, where he said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, there's a protecting act there. We've got to leave home, and we've really got to just say that word cleave is like glue. We've just got to glue ourselves to our women. We've got to let them know that we've got their back. And that happens with the words we use in front of the kids. I've seen couples, I cringe when I see couples out with other couples, and you know, sometimes a joke or a snarky remark will be made, and then a guy will zing his wife, or maybe a wife will zing her husband, and it's never good. Oh, sure, we laugh because what else can we do? But I know inside there's a pain that gets felt there. One of the commitments that Patty and I made early in our marriage was that we would never talk of divorce. We would, whatever we've got to face, but divorce was not going to be an option. And if I could just encourage you, if you've never made that commitment as a husband and wife, I would encourage you. I would encourage you, moms and dads, to pass it on to your kids. Look, we're all going to have problems. We are going to have difficulties, but we stand up and we say, till death do us part. And if I could just say a word as your pastor that would just say, man, Jesus never quits on us. Let's not quit on one another. And I think that's what it means to protect, is to know that we have their back, and that we are not going to bail. Marriage is not about two separate individuals doing their own thing, I have here, but they're two intertwined individuals who are going to work together to be one whole. A wife is her husband's other half, and a husband is his wife's other half, and together they become one flesh. And when we separate that in any way with our words, our actions, our attitudes, you can't separate flesh without there being wounds. And so there's where that pain comes in. If we just would commit that we are not gonna make fun of one another in public. We're not gonna say hurtful things behind somebody else's back. We are going to, I love what one guy said of his wife. He heard that she had to fill out a document, and under occupation, she wrote down housewife. And she was telling him this, and he said, you're not a housewife, you're my wife. And any woman who has a man that will stand up for her, protect her heart, protect her identity, protect her sense of security, will have a wife that wants to go out of her way to please her husband. All right, here's the last one that I want to give us, right, is that we would then, if we're going to love our wives, if we're going to, this is kind of weird, I don't mean it to love our moms like Mother's Day, but those women in our world, we need to lead well. And I think we can do that. I think men, certainly in our families, we can lead well. I think if somebody that maybe has a mom that's still older and now you're no longer a teen, you can actually be a help to your mom in this way by living well, making good choices, not being passive. A lot of passive men are out there, and it drives women crazy. And I understand it. Man, we make decisions all day. We interact with people all day. We just want to come home and just chill. But we need, it's interesting that when Paul wrote to Timothy about the kind of men to look for in the church, one of the prerequisites was look for men who lead their families well. He didn't say look for men who are doing well in the business world. Look for men who are leading their families well, because those are the men that see the value in their wives and their children. They're building into them. They're saying, hey, here's the direction we need to go. Let's go together. It takes a cooperation with your wife to lead your wife well. It's not just giving directives and giving orders, right, guys? It's asking input. It's seeking somebody else's opinion and saying, okay, let's together pray over this. Let's seek God's wisest choice. But you know what? It's not sitting back saying, okay, well, honey, whatever you want to do. One of the roughest things that happens is in our, when couples go to get married. It's one of my pet bugaboos. It seems it's all about the bride, and she's making all the choices, and the guy sits passively on the sidelines, and then it's like we throw a switch, and now we suddenly want him to be involved in decision making. Well, where was he for the time planning this wedding? He was relegated to the sideline, and we can't do that anymore. Tom Anderson was looking for a way to show love for his wife. He made a vow to himself as he drove with his wife on their 2-week vacation. He had been listening to some Christian tapes on how men can be better husbands and fathers. And after listening and hearing a message talking about that love was an act of the will, he decided that he was going to make some changes to show his wife that he loved her. So right from the moment they arrived at the cottage, he kissed his wife Evelyn at the door, and he said, "This new sweater, the new sweater you're wearing, it looks really good on you." And she was pleasantly surprised. "Oh, Tom, you noticed." He wanted to sit and read. Been a long day, but she wanted to go for a walk on the beach. And so he said, "You know what? Let's go for a walk on the beach." And they had a great time. For 2 weeks, it says here, Tom didn't call to check on the office. He did visit a museum, even though he hated museums. His wife seemed so relaxed and happy, he decided to keep remembering to choose love after they got home from this vacation. On the last night of the vacation, his wife Evelyn came to him. And she had a really sad look on her face. And Tom wondered, is it just because of the vacation being over? She said, "What's the matter?" And she looked at her husband, Tom, and she said, "Did the doctor give you some news?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" Evelyn had been to the doctor just a few weeks back for a checkup. And Evelyn said, "That checkup I had, did he tell you something about me, Tom? Am I dying? Is that why you've treated me so well these past 2 weeks?" Then Tom, he heard that, and there was like this kind of, you can imagine, stunned, and then he started laughing, and he said, "No, dear," and he took her in his arms. He said, "You're not dying, I'm just starting to live." And guys, I think if we were to love our wives, if we were to express love to our moms in a way that chose them, protected them, sought to build them up, we might find that we are just beginning to live. Father, I pray that you'd help us as men. It's a challenge. God, you know the way we're wired. You know it's not our nature to love. So I pray that you'd help us. I pray that you'd help us to love better than we've been doing. We can all certainly get better. To the person listening today that has maybe they're at ground zero, I pray, Father, you would give them the courage to begin, even as Tom did. Lord, there are some men that have just really, they've been knocking out of the ballpark, and I pray that you'd help them to finish well. I pray, Father, we'd have fewer stories of Bill and Melinda Gates and the Gores, people who have walked together a long time and decided to call it quits. That rather, God, you would raise up couples who are so committed and intertwined to one another, they leave a legacy for their kids of what real love looks like. Oh, Jesus, thank you for loving us. Thank you for your commitment to us. Thank you for your grace to us, your forgiveness of us that keeps us moving forward. It's in your name that I pray. Amen. Hey, join me as we sing with Max.
You call the sun to rise, and you lay it down to rest. You hold this heart of mine, and you hold my every breath. Such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so wonderful. Such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful you are. Seated in majesty, reigning in holiness. The table is set for me. You are the living bread. such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so wonderful, such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful you are, and nothing comes close to the Lord Almighty, nothing as sweet as your love and mercy, nothing comes close to the Lord Almighty, nothing as sweet as your love and mercy, and nothing comes close to the Lord Almighty, nothing as sweet as your love and mercy, and nothing comes close to the Lord Almighty, and nothing as sweet as your love and mercy. Jesus, the Son of God, hung on a cross to die, but not even death itself could hold you down. You rose to life, such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so wonderful, such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful you are, such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so